Welcome to the On Record podcast, a podcast where we talk with professionals and subject matter experts from diverse markets that are using video and audio technology in innovative ways to support their organization's objectives. My name is Carmen Haak, and my co-host today is Shelstad. Today our guest is Annie Holland, a faculty member in the Communication Sciences and Disorders Department at the MGH Institute of Health Professions, one of the country's top-rated SLP programs and part of the prestigious Mass General Brigham Health System. Annie is also the inaugural recipient of the CAPCSD-IVS Clinical Education Seed Grant. Welcome, Annie. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Annie,
would you share a bit about yourself with our listeners, about your journey and how you came to be in your current role at MGH?
Sure. I'm a speech-language pathologist, and I had always been really interested in communication and connection from a very early age. And that really led me to the profession when I was, selecting what I was going to do for my career. And then as I was practicing as a speech-language pathologist, I specialized in pediatrics. I loved working with my clients who were very young and their families. And as I worked more with them, I really found myself wanting to teach more and engage with people who were interested in the field, students who were pursuing a degree in speech pathology. And so as I started supervising more students and engaging more in teaching, then I transitioned to my current role where I'm teaching full-time and I get to teach graduate students, mostly speech-language pathology master's students, but we also do a lot of interprofessional teaching as well. So that's how I ended up where I am. And it's been such an awesome journey, and I love every minute of it.
I understand that you've worked across some really diverse clinical settings. Would you share more about that with us?
Sure. I think that's one of the big benefits of being in a health profession like speech-language pathology is that you really can work in different kinds of settings with different groups of people as your interests change or as your personal needs or family needs may change. And so I've been really fortunate to be able to work within school systems. I've worked in pediatric hospital systems, which has been really excellent. In my time at a pediatric hospital, I was doing some work in the neonatal intensive care unit, which was awesome. Our neonatal follow-up clinic there. So lots of different ways have I been able to work with children and their families in the speech pathology realm and working on communication, and then also on feeding, which is another aspect of speech pathology that we get to work with children and adults on, is feeding and swallowing. So doing that in different settings too.
Does that follow, or does that fall into your published research? Will you tell us more about your published research that you focused on?
Sure. One of my more recent publications is within my teaching of speech pathology graduate students. One of the things that I teach a lot about is clinical writing. And so I have really seen the power that good clinical writing can have, and also other clinical writing can have. The way that we write about the sessions we conduct can really do a lot to educate a family on our impressions. It can let other people on the care team know what we're thinking or what the recommendations are. And clinical writing that's done in such a way that is inaccessible or laden with biases and things can do a lot to harm that message. And so I really feel passionate about teaching my graduate students how to be really strong clinical writers so that all the important work that we do is communicated in really accessible and accurate ways for the family, for the patient, and for the whole care team. So everybody knows what's going on, what we're thinking, what we bring to the care plan. And so one of our more recent projects we did was have the students look at a piece of clinical writing. And in that piece, we put in lots of instances of problematic or biased language with the intention that our students could see some of those pop out and flag them as problematic and have a chance to rewrite those instances. And so we gave them that piece of writing and had them go through that exercise, identifying any of those pieces of language and trying to correct it. And then we engaged them in a training module where we talked about clinical writing, we talked about anti-oppressive practice, we talked about how we can make our clinical writing a lot stronger, a lot more accurate, and move away from using biased language. And then we had them do that same piece of writing again and complete the activity after the training. And in our research project, we were able to compare pre to post training and see the change that our students were able to demonstrate after they received the information, which was really fun.
The ability to keep bias out of this practice seems like it would be incredibly challenging, especially what you're talking about, clinical writing. So do you have any specific examples of somebody who was able to remove their bias from their clinical writing, or specific tools they might use?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's important in speech pathology and in other fields, but especially in speech pathology, where we work on communication, and communication is so deeply tied to a person's identity, to their culture, to things that are really important for us to know about and to be able to talk about. It's important for us to know different aspects of a person's race or ethnicity or cultural factors that are important, because when we're thinking about their communication, there are really real pieces that we want to make sure we don't misidentify as a disorder if it's something that actually is very acceptable given parts of their background. And so, in thinking about different times that we sometimes see biases, we have worked with our students a lot about the gender binary. So we have students who sometimes come into our program and will come from the lens of having this idea of a more rigid gender binary. And especially in working with children, boy using the he series pronouns only, and girl use it, and really working with our students to say, these are pediatric patients, and they're coming from families of all different kinds and all different, feelings around this, and teaching students how to talk with families about how they want us to address their children and speak with their children. I think that's really important for our students to know, that we don't just see something and immediately make an assumption and let that sort of direct our work and show up in the writing, but just really open things up for conversations with our families and with our patients, so that we're using the language that matters to them and makes sense for how they want us to talk with them, talk about them, and that carries over into how we write about them.
That's excellent. I was going to ask you to elaborate on some examples of why it matters so much in speech language, but you tackled that. That's incredibly interesting from the perspective of healthcare in general, but speech language pathology specifically. Is there room for AI to assist in this space, or is this human thought only that should be documented?
I think we've seen so much good that can come from AI. I think, especially for me, I love learning about new technologies that can help me spend more time with the people that I work with and spend more time in my teaching with students. And so I'm really excited to learn about how artificial intelligence and different programs can give me back some of that patient care or student teaching time. And I think that we're seeing a lot of strengths in some of these programs for assisting us in writing our clinical reports. It's an important piece of any speech-language pathologist and many other healthcare professionals' day is the documentation. It's important for reimbursement. It's important for communication among the care team. So it's something that we all need to do in our daily practice. And we're seeing that there are many AI programs that are able to take in a session or take in our notes and create something that could be very workable and could save us a lot of time as far as a session note or an evaluation report even. So we are seeing a lot of strengths, but then I think it's also important, and the reason why I engaged in this particular research study I'm doing now is we also have to be really aware and open about the risks as well, because there are things that we're seeing in the output of generative AI platforms that we need to be aware of, and we need to correct, and we need to make sure don't perpetuate, long-term biases and healthcare inequalities that we know exist and can easily be perpetuated.
Do you see these tools as potentially replacing speech language pathologists, or are they more of just a way to assist you in your workload?
I think one of the things that really makes me happy about speech-language pathology right now, and I think for the future, is that it is pretty resilient to being fully replaced by AI systems, because the human connection piece of the communication and the feeding that we do is something that incorporates a human-to-human response and interaction that cannot be duplicated by these various algorithms or machines. But I do see a lot of artificial intelligence really assisting us in being able to do our jobs better, not only with the clinical documentation, but in our augmentative communication systems. The AI that's being put into systems that are helping give voice to the people that we work with are showing such incredible strides in what they're able to help our patients communicate. And so in those ways, knowing how AI works and being able to be the human that uses the AI in responsible and smart ways is helping our patients make so many more improvements so much faster. And so I do see it as something that really, really supplements and enhances what we do. But I'm happy to say that I don't think it can replace the human component that is so important to speech-language pathology, communication, the feeding, but it can really help.
That was a really brave question, Kyle. I wasn't sure how that response was going to go. I'm just
the
teasing.
reason I ask is because, like, you always see people marketing their AI tools as a piece that can, one, make your job easier. Like, this is the solution for everything. Whereas, like, I wonder if clinicians, pathologists like yourself, are necessarily interested in that, or just interested in ways to kind of lighten your workload, make it give you more time to focus on the patient.
I never even thought about the augmentation part for the communication of the patient. I never thought about it that way too. It's not just the benefit of the communicator; it's also like the learner or the recipient of the therapy. That's fascinating. Sorry,
Yeah.
there was a question there, probably Kyle, but I thought that was cool about the augmented communication.
For sure. Yeah. And we know we've had certain aspects of our jobs that have had artificial intelligence sort of woven in for a long time that we have really benefited from our patients in using. And so there are aspects of the care that we provide and some of the assessment and treatment that we do that have been successfully transferred over to certain AI systems, especially if there's a patient who's working on voice and they're able to see their various voice outputs on a computer and be able to self-monitor. It's especially powerful for adult clients. So there are particular things that we had always been doing face-to-face provided by humans that we've transitioned certain things over to using AI systems with the help of a human facilitator. And we're really open to that because, again, it makes us be able to do our jobs better, and it makes us even more effective. So I think there's always room for the human connection piece in speech pathology. We, are still going to be the humans driving behind all of these things, but I think it's important for us to learn about the advances and be able to bring these things in, especially where it makes sense given the diagnosis.
And you had introduced a little bit about what that current research looks like and how it relates to the conversation we're having. Well, the cat's out of the bag. You are our inaugural recipient of the CAPCSD-IVS Clinical Education Seed Grant. So congratulations to you.
Thank you.
For our listeners, the IVS Clinical Education Seed Grant is a financial award that was offered through CAPCSD and funded by Intelligent Video Solutions. It's designed to support innovations in clinical education, training, and service delivery in communication sciences and disorders. Annie, what does this funding now make possible that you may have not been able to do otherwise?
Yes. So we've been so happy to be able to use this funding to create a research project where we have generative AI platforms generate speech-language evaluation reports. So part of this funding has made it so that we can access various platforms. We don't want to be biased and only look at one program and how that is generating speech and language reports. We wanted a variety. So in that way, we've been able to use this grant for access to those. And then we also have used this grant to be able to put together a team of experts, which is really important in this kind of research because we know that when we're talking about biased language, there's so much that comes with that. Language is an ever-evolving piece of human life, and when we're thinking about what we would consider to be biased or problematic language, we need many different minds to think about that. And we need people who do research in that particular space, who have interest in AI as well, to really be able to comment on what they see to be potentially biased language in those reports. And so this SEED grant has allowed us to put together a team of a variety of individuals, all of whom have extensive experience in biased language, all of whom also have a strong interest in artificial intelligence, and they come from all over. We connected with colleagues from many different universities, healthcare systems, and we were able to present our ideas for the project. And every single one, for the most part, was fully on board to review the reports generated by the various AI platforms and then comment on the biased language that they found. And so it's really made it possible so that we could assemble that team and be able to generate these reports in a way that really is representative of how people are working right now, because we also wanted it to be using systems and using those systems in a way that we know our students are using in their work right now in their clinical placements, and that practicing speech pathologists are using right now to help them in their work.
If you were referenced by a colleague to help them implement AI documentations tools in their student body, or to help them use and implement documentation tools with AI, is there a warning you'd give? Is there a caveat? What would you advise if someone was looking to explore these tools, maybe in an adjacent industry?
Sure. I would definitely point them to the prompt research, the research that we've seen in terms of how we prompt these systems, and letting that organization know that there are risks, there are biases, and we need to be sure we're doing this in really smart and ethical ways, and directing them to some of the literature in prompting these systems so that the output they receive is hopefully the best representative of the output, because we've been learning a lot about the way that these various platforms are prompted can result in a lot of different kinds of output. So that's what I would probably mostly caution the person against, is not to just fly in with no plan, because there are these risks of problematic language showing up, perpetuation of bias, some issues with ethics here. I would say tailoring your prompts and making sure that the people in your organization are using really well-written prompts so that the output is more of what they're looking for, and so that they aren't having to prompt and reprompt and edit, because again, we know that with that comes more and more use of these systems, and that has environmental impacts, the amount of times that we're doing all of these things. So if we can teach people the importance of prompting in very smart and efficient ways, that's another way that we can support better outputs.
I think that's very interesting. The fact that what you put in will ultimately get you more quality on the other end, and how you're wording things. Obviously, adoption has to be there, and there has to be a belief that this is going to be a tool that helps save time or money, or has a good investment on the output. Is there adoption concerns? Did you see peers or colleagues? You are working with a lot of people excited about AI. What does the other side of the coin look like? The resistors?
Yes, for sure. So when we started as a department talking about how we were going to bring AI into our teaching and think about it for teaching our students, we know that practicing clinicians are using this, so we know our students are going to be asked to use this in their clinical placements. We expected there to be pushback, and there were some good discussions, among different members and talking about it. But what we didn't expect was how much pushback we would receive from our students. And so that's been a really interesting piece that we didn't fully prepare for, is that a lot of our students, they're in their early 20s and they have a lot of very legitimate reasons for why they do not want to engage with AI in their practice as speech-language pathologists. And so we've actually had to do a lot of thinking about that and talking with our students about the reality that this is something that they will very likely be tasked to use in their clinical placements or in jobs. And so how can we teach them to use it in ways that feel comfortable for them, given that there's some very strong resistance there for very legitimate reasons?
Honestly, that's something we've seen in past conversations, that demographic is most resistant. So you think it'd be maybe the alternative, but no. Sorry, Kyle.
No, I was just, I'm surprised that it came from students, not like tenured faculty. And this is completely irrelevant, but I saw some Instagram reel the other day where it was some commencement speaker.
You're not even getting your news from TikTok. I don't know if I can trust what you're
I
about
don't
to
have
say.
TikTok, but basically the same thing, whatever. But the commencement speakers started like talking about AI and the future of it, and all the student graduates booed. Yeah, you saw that.
Yeah, it was a couple months ago. I saw it probably just recently for you on Reels.
But that was like my first exposure to like, oh, maybe students like aren't fully on board with this.
Yeah, and we make these assumptions, and we think, oh, we know exactly how to advance our teaching, and we need to bring in the best and the newest and the most sort of next step sorts of things. But I think it's really important for anybody in any line of work that we do to really kind of engage with our audience and figure out, okay, actually let's take a needs survey here, or let's actually figure out what the students are feeling about it, so that again we have the responsibility to teach them about artificial intelligence. We must teach them about how it's being used in speech-language pathology clinical practice. We would be doing our students a disservice to just say, oh, forget it, then we won't teach it. If you all don't want to use it, we won't teach it. That would be a real disservice to them. So we do need to be honest with them about that, be really transparent with the fact that this is something, it's going to show up, and your ability to use it in ethical and responsible ways is going to make it so that it provides the best with the least amount of negative impact or resource use as possible.
I'm curious, all of the focus that's going on this research and your work in this space, how does that impact your video observation and recording in these clinical education environments? Do they go hand in hand? Are they separate? How are you using them together, or do you maintain different spaces for these two topics?
We keep it all folded in together. So in our on-campus clinic, all of our sessions are video recorded, and we are watching our students via that live stream video in the moment. And for that, we are able to give the students the space in that treatment room with the patient and with the family to take some risks and to feel like they can try out things without their faculty member being physically in that space. And so in that way, we're able to let our students have some of that autonomy and learn how to be a practicing clinician without us necessarily jumping in at every moment. And in terms of our use of AI, we are able to fully fold in the fact that they're going to be writing a session note about what's happening in that recorded session for every single time they see a patient in our clinic. And so we're able to work with them and replay that video recording of the session and pull things out and, work with them to use different ways of writing up that session note in a way that is accurate to what happened. And we're always talking to our students about using objective language and removing any biased language that we find. So when we have AI supports in helping us with that session note output, we want our students to know there is a strong potential that there will be some biased or some subjective language here. So I need you to be able to identify it, and I need you to be able to rewrite those moments and come to me with any questions that you might have about that, because it's really difficult, especially as a new clinician who is just learning how to do the job, to then learn how to write about it is so new, and it's really tricky when you haven't put those various things into words many, many times already. It does require some help, and that's why we're there for them.
So in all these technologies, reflection is a huge theme, reflecting on the auto prompts, reflecting on what you're getting as the quality output from AI, reflection on the physicality and what's happening in the actual spaces with AV capture. What is a positive outcome that has come from using AV, whether it's in tandem with your clinical documentation with AI or if it's just AV?
I think one of our most favorite things that we do is at the end of every semester, our students pick a video clip from their sessions that they've had in the on-campus clinic, and they share it with everybody. So we have a very large cohort of students, and each student has 2 patients in our on-campus clinic their first year. And so at the end of every semester, we all get together. That large cohort is able to put up a selected clip by them, and they're able to explain to their classmates, here's the patient I'm going to show you, here's what we're going to do in the session, and what I was really proud of, or what I was really challenged with, or what I really would love your input on. And then they show a clip from those recorded sessions, and then every student in the cohort is able to see a patient that they're not familiar with, which is really important. They get more exposure and variety, and they're able to think about, okay, what would I have done in this situation? Or I really appreciated how my peer did something in this way. I'm going to do that with my client that I have, or my patient that I've got. So that's probably the most fun thing that we can use our video recordings for, is really celebrating each other's successes and exposing the whole cohort to all the various different patients that come through our on-campus pro bono clinic. It's really, really fun to do that at the end of every semester.
Annie, we have a lot of listeners that might be interested in contacting you to learn more about your work or just to follow you and your research. What is the best way for those listeners to get a hold of you?
Sure. I'm more than happy to connect via email. My email is akholland@mghihp.edu. And you can find our more recently published report on the biased language in the pre and post training that I talked about earlier. That's in the Teaching and Learning in Communication Sciences and Disorders Journal, which is open access. So you can find that there. I'm also on LinkedIn, Annie K. Holland. So I'm happy to connect with anyone, anytime.
Thank you, Annie. It was very enlightening. We learned a lot today, and it's good practice and information for every individual human being to hear.
It's really nice to know that people are doing some research on these AI tools, and so maybe we have some facts grounded in data as to how they should be used, and we aren't just kind of going with it and hoping that it all works out. Yes. So we really appreciate you doing this work.
Yes, thank you so much.
And if you or if someone you know is interested in learning more about the IVS Clinical Education Seed Grant, visit capcsid.org/scholarships. We'll see you next time. Thank you. On Record is a podcast presented by Intelligent Video Solutions, hosted by Mike Anzalone and Carmen Haak, and produced by Kyle Shelstad. Find us online at ipivs.com/onrecord and on social media at Intelligent Video Solutions.